Hello folks, my name's Cy Leslie, Gers TV, and I've got my guest today, Mark Dingwall, here join me to discuss Rangers' latest transfer rumour. How's things, Mark?
Not too bad, mate, not too bad. Like the rest of us in Glasgow, terrified to go out because of that wind. You know, it's absolutely Baltic when you go out there, which brings us neatly to our latest signing target, who's also got a bit of experience of the Baltics.
Aye, well, I don't think it surprises anybody that the rumours are that Rangers are going for a German-type player or someone from that league. I think there's something in this, to be fair, because a lot of the criticism that we had in the past was that we weren't physical enough and we didn't have an aerial ability. With the set-piece coaching and the way that he's utilised Fernandes, it wouldn't surprise me if that's the type of player we go for.
Yeah, and Ryan Naderi is 6'3". He's a wee bit young at 22. Slightly concerned number of injuries that he's had.
Yeah.
But looking at his stats, he seems to have gone from, not a huge amount of goals to doing fairly well. Is it Hansa Rostock who are in
Third division?
The German third division, which is not a place that I think the other fans are happy to be in, because it's fairly recently they were in Bundesliga 1.
Bundesliga, yeah.
And they've gone down. But there are, if you look at the German leagues, there are quite a few bigger teams that have gone down into free fall over the last few years. Not least, of course, were our old pals Hamburg, who I think it's stuck in Bundesliga 2 for about 5 seasons.
It's a very hard league. It's a very hard league in the level.
Yeah. So he's, as I said, the one kind of worry I've got is the number of injuries that he's had in recent years, which mostly seem to be lower leg troubles. The ankle, the calf. Yeah. But if you're looking at who's been playing for, starting off locally in Dresden and then going to Mönchengladbach and then to Rostock. Obviously, as you said earlier, with our coach being German himself, then she'll have no lack of people that have been watching him, getting reports on him. And I think if you look at where Danny Rowe has coached, the German national team, Bayern Munich, then you'll have all sorts of insights into German players. But and I think also he'd quite like that, shall we say, that German mentality that the guy's obviously been born and raised in.
Yeah. I spoke to my friend just before we came on, you, Stigman, from Hansa Rostock. Yep. And he's also the Rostock Loyal Rangers Supporters Club. Follows Rangers all over Europe and comes to lots of games. I posted the message on the board there, what he said to me. He's working now, but basically what he said was that his heart's in two places with this one. Rostock badly need this guy to get the promotion back into the second division and go up the leagues. But if he went to Rangers, he would be helping us fight to win the title. That's a good description of it from a Rostock and Rangers fan. I think that that's the type of player that we'll go for, to be fair. But it's €3 million. Is he worth that? That's the question.
Well, if you look at how the world has changed around us in the last few years, I'm almost tempted to say that it's not a huge amount of money for the position. And if you look at our options up front, you've mentioned yourself there about Manny Fernandes being used up front, particularly at the free kicks and corners. Now, Manny Fernandes has got that almost typical, what you would call centre forwards build.
Aye.
A real battering ram of a player, which I'm not sure that our other striking options have. Some people mentioned that they thought that Danilo was given off body language on Sunday, of that being his last game for Rangers. Now, farewell, and there's apparently I think it's Knack Breda in Holland have been interested in him. We've got
he played in Holland.
Yeah, Majowski is someone who I liked at Aberdeen, but he hasn't really set the heather on fire with us so far. I'd like to see him improve, but at the moment he doesn't. He's definitely not firing in all cylinders. And the other players that we've got up front, as I say, I don't think they look like traditional centre forwards. And although it might be a little bit old-fashioned, I'm a great believer in the old-fashioned forward line, where if you look at Haitley and McCoist, that was a perfect one, because you had the big battering ram and you had the poacher.
Yeah.
You know, they would pick up the scraps, get them in the back of the net, and call me old-fashioned in that. I think that's a combination that works.
I like that. I like that combination.
If you look at the way that the money's dripped down from the English Premiership, it's changed the landscape through the whole of Europe, and it's meant that the money that you've got to pay for strikers is not what it once was. You know, it's exponentially changed, and investing in this lad at that price might be a good investment, I think.
Yeah, and also we spent a lot of money on Chermiti. I felt at the weekend we badly missed him. Now that would give us a real different dynamics up front. We would have two big, powerful strikers and an aerial ability, so it would change our ability up front as well, because that's our biggest problem. We're scoring goals, but Tavernier's our top goal scorer, and I think second would be Fernandes. I've not checked that, but it's definitely defenders that are scoring the goals. This guy can put the ball in the net, and he's got the aerial ability to give us more options.
Funnily enough, I was talking to somebody on Sunday, and I was saying, you know, the Celtic games, obviously, you know, where Chermiti really flourished. But the guy I was talking to says, I'm not sure that he's an out-and-out centre forward. I think he's more likely to be the guy that gets into position, then lays it off to other people.
Yeah.
That's one opinion. The size of him is obviously, as I say, good for a centre forward. And I think he carries his weight well, Chermiti.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But he's got that £8.5 million price tag hanging around his neck. And I think with Kevin Thelwell, the former director of football, leaving, I think there's a temptation in the club to get rid of Chermiti, simply to try and recoup some of that money, because it's to be honest, the way we are financed just now, it's a gamble that was probably too expensive for us. So whether Chermiti stays or goes, that's one thing. But I think in terms of the types of players that we've got, then the new signing could fit in well. Yeah.
Now we don't know a lot about the player, but he'll know a lot about Danny Rowe, because Danny Rowe's very experienced in that German market. I don't know if he said any. I think he said one dealing before with Rostock as a manager, with a Swedish club. I'm trying to remember. I read something with follow an hour ago, but it's definitely a market that you'll get more bargains in the kind of lower leagues in Germany.
Well, it's as simple as he's got the language, hasn't he? You know, and he's also, that's where he spent his working life, is in recruitment, is in coaching. So, you know, I'm sure that he'll, not only will Rangers have done their due diligence, and I'm sure that Danny Rowe will have ensured that not just, you know, people who are on our staff have looked at him, not just looked at his videos. I'm sure that people have actually seen him in the flesh more than a few times. And
culturally as well, most Germans seem to have kind of adopted to Scottish football quite well, adapted to Scottish football.
Well, being Northern Europeans, you know, whether it's Dutch, Danish, Scandinavians, Germans, usually they've got the language as well, don't they? You know, they all tend to have English as a second language. In fact, in some countries, you could even say that they speak it better than we do. And so I'm sure that culturally he'll be able to fit in, you know, without too many problems. Whether he likes his deep fried Mars bars, I'm not sure, but he can certainly acquire that taste when he's here.
I'll need to speak to our big pal Werner. He'll know a wee bit about him, maybe.
Yeah, I think having eyes on the ground is really what you're wanting, because you know yourself, you can watch games on television, but it's not telling you the whole story.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer that statistics are there to be used, but they don't tell you the whole story of the game.
Yeah. It's an interesting market getting into the German market, because as we know quite well, Mark, Rangers are massive in Germany in terms of supporters clubs, and the amount of Germans that we see at Ibrox on a yearly basis, and more so on European trips, and that could only help.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well as if the club's looking at these things, first it will be in a sporting sense, but then secondly in a commercial sense. And I've always believed that the Northern Europeans with the languages and with the communications, it makes sense to sign Northern Europeans because they slot in, and in terms of getting the spin-off, and as you say, the travel from Germany, Holland, Sweden, Norway, Finland is a lot easier. So if you're looking at it from that point of view, it could be a good sign. Of course, that depends on how well he does, I mean, I think with two major debuts on Sunday, and I think both of them did pretty well,
Yeah.
And I think there's change there. I mean, if you cast your mind back a few weeks, Danny Rowe came in. He said, "I've got a traffic light system, red, amber, and green, and I'm talking to the players and I'm telling them exactly where they are." So that means some of them have got to buck up their ideas. It means that other ones might just have got the red light that said, "You're not for us. You've got to get your agent to look for a move." So I'm sure there'll be more comings and goings by the time of the deadline. And if you listen carefully to what Danny Rowe was saying in his press conferences, I think obviously the striking position is one that he's possibly, that's what's been obsessing him, is to get people in there, and then latterly, probably the defence as well, which we've all known has needed a bit of a shake up as well. But it's good to see Tav returning to his old ways on Sunday.
I mean that's worth talking about. 100 goals. I mean, you know that we've all seen it, the criticism he's had over the years, but 100 league goals for anybody would be an achievement, but for a defender, it's incredible.
Well, some of us have made a fair bit of money betting on him for goal scorer because of his ability, particularly at free kicks and obviously taking the penalties. My view on Tav is that he's been an adornment to the club. How many times has Tav made a story by being in the front page of the newspaper? Almost never. He's not been an embarrassment to the club. He's been a good leader. Towards the end of his career there, I think he suffered from the last 2 seasons. Our fans have been hypercritical because of the way the club's been run and what was happening on the pitch. And he got a backlash there, where you were actually having some of our fans talking what I would call Timmy talk. They were going, "Oh, he's only won, one medal here, and he's only won 1 cup, and he's done, And I'm just like, you're forgetting what he has done for us, particularly in Europe. I think really needs to be, he must have one of the best records of any Rangers player in Europe, out with Cup Winners' Cup medals in 1972. So
and
people have got short.
He was also minutes away from winning a European trophy.
People have got short memories with Tav, and as I say, I think part of that was you got people were in a frenzy, and so suddenly people were obsessing about physios and who the club doctor was and all wee incidents, that meant they were shite and they were the worst that we'd ever seen. And virtually nobody was exempt from that criticism. And I think that Tav, being high profile, being the guy as a club captain whom the club would usually put up to the media before big games and after big games, and obviously Celtic games he's there, so he's a figurehead to be shot at, and I think that went very much over the score in the last kind of 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, one of the criticisms of him is an element of support. Want him to come on after games where we get beat, big games when we get beat.
Sorry, sorry, Simon, I could hardly hear you there because your microphone wasn't picking up.
All right. One of the criticisms he's got is some of our supporters want him to come on after big games and rant and rave and scream abuse. He's not that type of player, but you don't really have that in football anymore, to be fair. They type of leaders you don't get. I think he does his talking in the dressing room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think he's, as I said to you, I think he's been an adornment to the club. He's behaved himself well in private and public. Simple things like, he did one of the readings at Walter's funeral, which, showed a touch of class as the captain, kind of looping in the players to pay tribute to Walter. And these are things which to me are almost as important as what he does on the pitch. It's how you behave off the pitch and in all the dealings in your life. You're up for criticism when you're a Rangers player, and quite rightly so.
And I think the new role he's got with Danny Rowe seems to have suited him as well. He's not got the legs to play 3 games a week and take every corner and get back for it. And Danny Rowe's he's acknowledged that, and he's now given him a role where he's coming in important games. And he's been vital in important games in the last 8 games anyway, where we've won 8 games at a time when the manager came in, we were desperate to win games.
It's one of those topics where I have been probably not forward enough in press conferences, because one of the things I'd quite like to ask Danny Rowe, but you don't want him to go on for 10 minutes talking about the one subject, and that is he seems to be very keen on rotation. As I say, you look at even Sunday there, he took off our 2 new debutants after 53, 54 minutes. And he seems to use a lot of his substitutes to give people a little bit of time in the pitch. My view has always been that the starting 11, if you look at the way Dujon, Sterling's been held back, would be that once the medics say the players are fit to go, I would then always go with your strongest 11. Because they can get injured in this game, but they can also get injured in the first minute of the next game that you hold them back for. So, by holding them back, and most professional footballers have got some kind of chronic injury that they carry with them anyway. So Danny Rose, I say, seems to be very much into looking forward and managing the minutes of the players, perhaps conscious of, well, we're playing in Europe. We usually play in the latter stages of the domestic cup competition as well, and there have been seasons where we're playing 60, 70 games. So that's obviously something that has to take into consideration. So I'll probably get around it when it's appropriate in one of these press conferences to actually ask him, what is your strategy here? We see one thing, but what does that actually mean? Are you strictly adhering to a rotational look at the team based on what the medical science is telling you, and how much of that do you take straightforwardly, and how much of it do you adapt with what you know with individual players or with your experience from other clubs as your own career's developed?
So back to the, you're talking about Danny Rowe at press conferences there, and back to the transfer market. We've got, what, a week left? Is that right?
Yeah.
Maybe less than that. What do you think, your own opinion, if we're going to go and get any more players, who do you think, what type of player and what position do you think is the important, the priority?
As I said, I think the centre forward's one thing, and then defensively at the back, we've been talking about that for a long time. And again, it's like, if you remember when Walter got in Davy Weir and Ugo Ekiog, and that just solved the problem that we were having at that time. So I think they may see at least one fairly top quality defender coming in to steady the ship. Danny Rowe, as we know, is not afraid to change the formation during the game, depending on how the game's going and how the players are performing. And if a player needs to come off, he's been quite quick to change that. So people talk about, people and players on the left, players on the right, and in terms of the wingers we've got, can they be played in both wings so that you've got that option to switch them? I think we're doing all right there. And in terms of the funds that we've got available, in terms of the headroom that we've got, for the rules regarding purchases, then I would certainly say that striking position is one thing, and that I think if we get Naderi, that helps to solve one problem. And then at the back, we've been winning games, but yourself, there have been a few games where you're just sort of, if you look at the Dundee game, Dundee were well pushed back. Jack Butland hardly had a proper save to make, but yet there's been a few games where there have been very, very dodgy minutes when the opposition make a break up pitch and suddenly we're outnumbered at the back. We've been caught. And so I think that needs to be strongly addressed before it catches us out.
You've mentioned Danny Rowe and team rotation. What do you think he'll do in terms of the Porto game then? It is you could say that it's a meaningless game in terms of we can't qualify, but there's points to be won on it, and also we want to get the coefficients up as high as possible, because if Rangers were to win the league, and I believe they will, and the results go the right way for us, we could be straight into the Champions League. So does he play his best team, which I think he should do? I think consistency is the key to this season. Or does he go for the old resting players?
No, I think you've got to go. One is it's Europe. Two, it's a reasonable opponent you're up against, and there is nothing better for players' confidence than wins, and there's nothing worse than a loss. And there's also a financial aspect where you do get money for draws, for wins, for participation.
Yeah.
And people are saying, Olympiacos winning means that, we're dropping out, whatever. I think that's all still to be, that's all still up in the air, because you never know what can happen with other clubs in other countries, and how it affects us all at the end of the season. So go for a win. And I think in particular the Dujon Sterling, with him being held back, I'm convinced that he's been saving him for a big game, and I think that might be the Porto game, where you will be up against a European team of quality, and that could turn out to be a very tactical battle, and with pressure for 90 minutes on a scale that we don't normally get domestically on us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. I think the big one is consistency for us. The more we're winning and the more clean sheets, these clean sheets are incredible. When Danny Rowe first came in, we lost 3-0 away from home, and he apologised to the fans, but I don't think anybody, even the board when they brought him in, I don't think anyone would have believed that we could have brought in a manager to change things so quickly that you're almost expecting Rangers to get a clean sheet in Scottish football now.
Well, funnily enough, I don't really think that we've. I think some of the results have been a wee bit tighter than they look on paper, and as I say, I tend to be very, very nervous when almost any game when the opposition gets the ball. I'm a ball watcher. You know, I just want it in the back of their net. I want it away from our goal, and I usually watch games for a second time the day after to actually get more out of them than I do when I'm actually at the game. Funnily enough, bumped into John Brown after the Ludogorets game, and we get chatting away about various bits and pieces, myself and Alistair Aird, and John saying, you know, he says that what I'm liking about this guy is he's finding a way to win. You know, it's not always the easiest to go 3 or 4 up and coast in, and this guy's taking what he's got in terms of the player pool, and he's moving them around. Some games a fair bit, some games he's maybe changing 1 or 2 the starting 11, but as John said, he's finding a way to win, and as you say, it is pretty extraordinary when you consider how we started the season to where we are now. Is there a Danny Rose style? No, the Danny Rose style is do what it takes to win.
Yeah.
I was watching,
and that's what a Rangers manager should be doing.
Yeah, but it's easy to say that. It's not so easy to do it, you know. And
that's correct,
and I think I was watching a YouTube show the other night there where one of the coaches at Man United, Remy, with the unpronounceable Belgian style name, although he's certainly not got a Belgian accent, was talking about when Cristiano Ronaldo came to Manchester United and getting about 20 goals a season. And he said, I worked on him mentally. And he said, I think your biggest problem is you want to score the perfect goal. Mm-hmm. And what you want to be doing is getting those little flicks, the unspectacular ones that you're not bashing into the net at 70 miles an hour, but they tick up, and you should be doing 40 goals a season rather than trying to score the perfect goal. And again, taking that example, Danny Rowe has said sometimes our players are trying to score the perfect goal and they're trying to score it on their own, whereas I'd be just happy if you get into the position of position surrounds you and you make that pass to one of your teammates and he scores. I think there is a wee bit about that. I mean, there's a few times some of our guys are kind of dithering over the ball in the box, aren't they? You know, rather than making that pass to their teammates.
Yeah, well, I put a comment on the screen there from a good pal of ours from Belfast, Graham Hanna. Good afternoon, gents. Yesterday underlined again the chance creation needs addressed. We need an attacking midfielder or wide forward badly. I would agree with that. When you see an attacking midfielder, we're talking box to box. If you look at the weekend there, Mark, what you were saying a minute ago there about the perfect goal, with 5 minutes to go, Danny Rowe changes the whole attack and Rangers get another 2 goals. So winning 3-0 gives us the benefit. We didn't just catch up with Celtic in points and overtake them. We've now overtook them in goals as well. This could come down to goal difference, that the league is that tight. And I think Danny Rowe's starting to think that and address that with the players.
Yeah, well, that's the attention to detail that you've got, and that, you know, and also I believe that scoring goals is the best thing for any club, you know, no matter how they go in. And experience has told us, you know, this year it's 40 years since the Hearts lost the league in the last day of the season. We've had our own final day of the season exploits to do over the years with various teams, both home and away, and you don't really realise until it gets to the end of the season. It's quite easy to take your eye off the ball with the goal difference, and you know, it's definitely something that's going to help us in the end. And I used to get a bit upset sometimes with, even during the 9 in a row years, because I often felt that Big Goffey, for instance, would, if Rangers were 2 or 3 up, you could see Goffey telling them, with 20 minutes to go, don't get injured, don't get red carded, let's just calm it down. Whereas I was wanting us to go for 4 and 5 and 6. And I think that could be...
Two examples of that I would fire in would be the 5-1 game at Ibrox against Celtic, and when we played Hearts and they went down to 9 men and Rangers sat back not to torment them too much, maybe a sportsman's kind of thing. But I agree with you, the time has come where you need to be looking after goals.
Mm-hmm. And again, if we're in a totally unknown situation this year, where if you look at us with Russell Martin, you look at Celtic with Wilfred Nancy, you look at Hearts with whatever magic they've managed to perform in the recruitment so far, and then suddenly Hearts are throwing a couple of problems to deal with Devlin and with Shankland, because this is normally the time of year where over our lifetimes, you tend to find that Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen, Dundee United, they'll have... It's usually one of them every season has a really good start to the season, but it's come the turn of the year when you have the injuries coming in, where you have suspensions, and where you have their squad depth starts to tell against them. Yeah. And so this year is absolutely fascinating. Could you have thought a month ago, maybe a bit more than that Rangers would be in the position where we are now, leapfrogging Celtic, and the first, second and third teams in the league are hardly covered by a blanket? So it's all to play for. People can say Celtic have got... I tend to think we, as a support, and the Scottish media tend to underestimate the cost of the Celtic squad. Very, very expensively assembled squad, a lot of experience in it, and that helps them, amongst other things that help them. For instance, the lack of sendings off that they've had. So there's a long way to go in this, and I'm absolutely sure that there's a few downers for us and a few uppers in the way to the last day of the season, because it's, in our lifetimes, it's almost uncharted territory, where you've got the power financially of the old firm is being challenged by Hearts through them having very careful management of their resources. And as I say, you come to this time of year, that's usually when it starts to tell on teams like Hearts and Hibs and Aberdeen, who've had good starts to the season in the past.
Interestingly, quick topic I'm going to ask you about, because you get a better view of it than me. I'm up at the back of the director's box, but in the press area that you're in, you're right beside the VAR technical area that they've got on the park. And now that had there was issues with that at the weekend, and I believe they didn't use it. What happens there? What did they tell you afterwards in the press room what happened? But it looked like a gentleman's agreement where they have to speak to both managers and let them know and have an agreement on that. Is that right?
Well, you've asked me a question I simply don't know the answer to. But as you say, I think we kicked off about 5 minutes later than the Hearts Celtic game, and as you saw yourself, you had the referee Clancy talking to somebody's in his earpiece. Then he went over and spoke to the two people in charge of the actual VAR machine at the side of the pitch. He then talked to Danny Rowe and Stephen Presley, and then he talked to the two captains. So obviously, amongst them,
it looked like an agreement.
I don't know what the protocol is, I'll be honest about that. But
it didn't happen at Hampden, if you remember, when we played at Hampden. They had an announcement that the VAR wasn't working.
Mm-hmm. That might just because they've got a better announcer than we've got. Who knows? And but you know what? When they were talking about bringing VAR in, and people were saying, "Oh, this will be great," and I said, "Listen, there's only one team that this is going to benefit in Scotland. Only one team, and we've seen how they have benefited. So for the rest of the teams in the league other than Celtic, VAR's immaterial. Doesn't help us, only helps them." because of their control of the SFA, SPFL, referees department. Every single instance, they will always get the benefit of the doubt. We will never get the benefit of the doubt. Ours will have to be literally, you shot the man in the head from 2 inches before we get anything, other than what we should do. It just hasn't happened, and it won't happen. So
I've used the quote that Rangers are refereed twice to not every game now.
Yeah. But you know what? It's been that way all of my lifetime. And I stuck up a thread in Follow a few months ago. There's the autobiography of Sir Robert Kelly, who's famous Celtic chairman. I think his father played in the first ever Celtic game, and chapter 1. Now, this is a guy who won the European Cup for Celtic. He was a chairman at the time when they won the European Cup. And chapter 1 is the first disallowed goal. So this is the paranoia that Celtic are absolutely bathed in from birth. And they have ranted about it for over 100 years. I was watching a Celtic podcast earlier today just for giggles. And guess what? They were given a red card in Scotland for the first game in 86, right? In 86 games. Unheard of, unprecedented. And what were they were talking about? We know why it was done.
Yep.
We know basically that these guys are all prodigies. You know what? They think that we don't know that there's school books out there where they list what team they supported as a kid. And you're going, this is deranged. Deranged. But you know what? You and I accept it because that's how they are. People from other countries looking at this, see it's completely psychotic. But that's part of the culture. And people know, whether they're referees or officials in the SFA or the SPFL or whatever, they know you give Celtic a fair crack of the whip and it'll be held against you, because all they want is bias. That's what they want. They demand bias. And if you argue against it or you try to play fair, that ain't good enough, So I'm sure there'll be a few more incidents before the end of the season.
It's interesting what you were saying, what you were highlighting a minute ago, because just a quick start for you on it was that when I was watching the game, the Rangers game kicks off, as you said, 5 minutes after Celtic. We've got a disallowed goal. Rangers game in the second half starts off 5 minutes after the Celtic game. And guess what? The two games finished almost parallel in a game where Celtic needed a goal to win it. Badly needed it. The two games still finished at the same time. It's incredible.
I think they announced that the Celtic game, that there was 8 minutes of extra time, but they effectively played 10. It's gone back to it was probably at its worst when Tommy Burns was a Celtic manager, where every week Celtic somehow contrived to get their kick-off held back by at least 5 minutes, which meant that in every single game they played, they knew what they had to do in those final 5 minutes. When normally other teams are starting to fade a little bit, because Celtic traditionally have got better players than most teams, and stronger towards the end. But that was a feature of Celtic under Tommy Burns, was that they would contrive to get their kick-off put back by 5 minutes by mucking around in the tunnel or on the pitch or doing whatever they do. And so you saw that again, mostly through VAR, to be frank, this time. But again, 8 minutes, for of extra time in the second half. I think I'm going to go and have a wee look at that video, that game between Hearts and Celtic, and just work out where those 8 minutes came from. Presumably there must have been a chainsaw massacre on the pitch at some point. But we'll have a wee look at that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure if Celtic were winning, it wouldn't have been 8 minutes, wouldn't it? But aye, it's interesting stuff. And the really interesting part of it was what you mentioned about Danny Rowe and his attention to detail. I think he used that to his advantage, and it went out because when he changed the last 4 minutes that were added on, Berjami completely changed the game. I think the instructions were we need goals, go out and get goals. Because 1-0 wasn't good enough for Rangers at the weekend.
No, and you know what? I don't think it ever is, because it grows in your mind the fragility at the back. You know, that it's you do wonder, you know, how good that defence is, because, you know, we've seen repeatedly that there have been problems with it, you know. But I think that Rowe, when sometimes when you listen to him, he gives away little bits about how he operates. I mean, for instance, when he was talking about Asgard the other week there, and somebody said, "Oh, you've moved them from wing to wing."
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, well," he said, what you see now is because he's playing where he prefers to play, it receives the ball a lot easier, and he moves it on a lot easier. So the number of touches he's taken in possession has fallen, but that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because he's receiving and getting rid of the ball where he wants to get rid of it a lot quicker. Now, I'm sure a lot of coaches, well, we know that a lot of coaches, in fact, virtually all of them, they'll look at a player and they'll think, I'm the guy that can improve him. I'm the guy that sees something in this player that nobody else has seen or nobody else has exploited. And I think that you're getting that very much with Danny Rowe, is that he's getting that little bit of extra out of a lot of these players.
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic talking to you, Mark. A good insight. How do you think the rest of the season will go then, just to finish up?
I think it will go to the last couple of rounds of games.
Yeah, I would say that I wouldn't rule Hearts out. I think they're going to be up there to the very end.
You know, there was a big discussion on the website about who do you want to win this weekend, Hearts or Celtic, and a lot of people were saying we want Hearts to win because, one, we don't like Celtic, and two, if it's not going to be us that wins it, we'd rather see Hearts win the league.
Yeah.
And we also believe that anything that damages Celtic is good, and we've still got a job to do against Hearts. And Hearts, like everybody else, they will have unexpected losses in some games. So I'm expecting it to go like that. You know, I mean, you've already seen Hearts had a wee stumble in the last couple of weeks with some of their games. And we keep winning, and how we win doesn't really matter. But we've started to win, and that's the magic formula, is that Rangers are winning far more than they lose, far more than they draw. And, you know, that's a great thing for us. But as I say, I do expect, because of the nature of the three squads, the nature of, to be honest, of the three managers, McInnes is an experienced manager, but has he been experienced in title races? It's quite amusing to see some of the Celtic podcasts where they're talking about his behaviour on Sunday. I mean, as though their managers and coaches, you know, never misbehave, and they're going, oh, he was ranting and raving and he's lost it and he's off his head. I don't think he is off his head. I think he's just behaving as most managers do. You know, very passionate in an environment where you've got to be in the opposition's face. And I believe that he'll be calm enough to get the best out of his team. Whether in the end it's enough, who knows? What I'm really interested in is Rangers have been through one of the most bizarre periods on the pitch that I can ever remember, with the signing and the behaviour of Russell Martin, and to be where we are now is almost beyond belief, considering how we started the season. So when they come to write the history books in this season, I'm sure it will be I'm sure it'll be of great interest to future generations simply because of how odd it's all been.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And just when you mentioned Derek McInnes, I thought he was very calculated and he deliberately mentioned the obviously the controversy with Celtic not being having players sent off. He made it sound like a wee slip of the tongue, but he was very calculated in that press conference, and quite rightly so.
Yeah, I think all these guys are always looking for that little sliver of of being able to get one up on the opposition. They imagine that maybe if the referee hears this or whoever hears it, that'll tell against them. But as I say, I mean, if you want to upset the opposition with statistics, then that one with with one red card in 86 games is probably the best you can ever do. And as I say, if you look at the fury with which Celtic supporters have responded to that I enjoy that, because that's telling you how nervous they are. Celtic fans, they have lauded it for a long time because of the difficulties we went through. They were, down our throats about the numbers, our titles, the one. Here's the bad news for them. Most of your trebles ain't worth a damn, because they were played when Rangers were down and out, when we were struggling to recover from what David Murray and Craig White and the Spivs had done to us. So all your Scott Brown era players, put your medals in the bin, because they ain't worth a damn. Now, things are a little bit better for us. You still get money in the bank. And suddenly, they start to see how badly run they've been. Right? Now, if you have a look at this, who Celtic have signed over the last 4 or 5 seasons, there are players that they spent 3 million, 4.5 million on, and you can barely remember their names. But because they were winning, they didn't care. Yeah. So all the stuff that they're coming out about now, about Dermot Desmond being a minority shareholder, well, you were bragging about Dermot being a billionaire. You never quizzed him. His shares cost him 2 million. He's hoisted 7.8 million in dividends, still get his original shares, still by far the biggest shareholder. He has been running the club for over a decade by himself. And you never said a peep. You never said a peep. So let's not start crying about that now. Now also, that it's starting
you're saying that, Mark, it's a great point. But also, they chased Peter Lawwell at their club. Peter Lawwell was in charge of their club when they got their last sending off, and threatened to take the SFA to court, and made it clear that a referee's life will be made hell if you give a sending off against Celtic. 87 games later, after they're chased away, Peter Lawwell, they've had a sending off.
Listen, in my lifetime, Celtic have had a very nasty habit. Anybody they don't like, and that can be opposition players, or it can be opposition clubs as a whole, or it can be officials at the SFA, SFL, SPFL, journalists. And what they would normally do is they would give them the black spot. The Celtic View, there would be an article in the Celtic View, and that was a signal to Celtic fans to go after them. And if you cast your mind back, some of the recipients of that black spot for not liking Celtic, being against Celtic, have included Jerry McNee, right? Jerry McNee and Hugh Keevins, who between them must have written about a dozen books about Celtic. And Hugh Keevins, the pressure he was under, he started one of his columns in the newspaper saying, "Oh, you can't hate me. I'm a Celtic man like you. I had 3 priests at my daughter's wedding." I mean, this is the lunacy that we're dealing with in this city. And so it's no surprise to me to find that once they come under a little bit of pressure, all the old stuff comes out. All the old things about the Protestants kept us down. Sir George Graham, the president of the SFA, was a master mason. all this nuttery that tells me that they're under pressure, they don't like it. And then, as I say, they've started even to turn against Dermot, who, gave them great stability, was their shirt sponsor, and they never questioned him when things were going well. Now you've got this kind of this kind of narrative that they're trying to write just now, which is that, Dermot's been bad for us, and he's only a minority shareholder. There was not a titter about that when you were doing well. You didn't give a damn about who your shareholders were. You should have done, same as a lot of our fans should have maybe thought a bit deeper about David Murray in his heyday, when some of us, in the trust and follow and people like yourself, Simon, who had worries, never thought it was going to get as bad as it did, but it did. And now you've got the guy who is in charge of your club, and let me make this prophecy: when he sells his shares, you ain't going to sell it to somebody you're going to like. You're going to sell it to somebody like the Glazers that are going to be hoisting fortunes out your club. So what they're also forgetting is, and what they have absolutely no answer to, I have watched on television, radio, podcasts, Facebook groups, message boards. The one issue that Celtic fans do not face up to is, at the last AGM, there were 14 resolutions, and Dermot won every single one of them by 98 or 99%. Right? The one lesson we learned from David Murray was that equity is king. So what's their solution to that 98 and 99% vote? Nothing. They ain't even discussing it. They seem to think that if they sing enough about the IRA or about killing Michael Nicholson and his family, or threatening Peter Law long enough, that somebody's just going to hand over their shares to them. That isn't the real world. So worry about that whilst you're worrying about how your team's doing in the league, Celtic fans, because that's a big question that none of you have looked at. So that's my last word to them.
And over the city, Rangers are finally in my lifetime starting to be run correctly and professionally. And I've got to admit, I'm buying into the Americans and the American dream.
Well, you know what? I don't think the Americans have spent about 50 million to get 50.1% of the club. They ain't invested that money to lose it. Yeah. And you know what? They're going to probably put in another 20 million over this year, because that's the cost of running a club. That's the cost of putting Rangers to rights again. And I'm sure there'll be ups and downs. I'm sure there'll be unpopular decisions. There'll be stupid decisions. But I think the Yankees, they will come in from an environment where, with the 49ers, whatever, where you've got that competitive tension amongst teams in that league, and in fact in all American sports. Yeah. So they ain't looking for a biased setup amongst the governing bodies. What they are doing, or what they will look for, is to have fair play. And the longer they're here, they'll realise that there are decisions getting made in Scotland, not for good reasons, but for very, very bad reasons. And I don't think that they'll stand for that in the long term. And I think if you look at Rangers now, for the first time, have got a proper legal department, rather than having a lawyer who works for a firm outside. We've got our own legal department that's properly staffed for a change. And I think in the background, you'll start to see changes. I believe that when John Brown was dug up for his comments in an official club channel, that we lost that case, but as they've looked at how the setup internally, they had to agree, the authorities had to agree that in future things would be handled differently, because their policies and practices simply weren't up to scratch. So that's the type of slow changes that might not seem that important today, but in the future, they'll have to be dealt with in a certain way that provides the maximum fairness to all involved. So I'm happy with that.
Exciting times at Ibrox on the park and off the park. Thank you very much, Mark Dingwall. Follow, and all the best, pal.
Thanks a million.